Ladies, let's talk. There's a certain kind of woman who walks into a room and doesn't need to announce her worth, because everything about her shows it. Her energy, her standards, her choices. That's what I call a hive, Al, you woman. And today, I want to give you a powerful lens to evaluate your own behavior, not to judge yourself, but to elevate yourself. When a woman truly knows her worth, she stops chasing answers from people who are unwilling or unable to give them. One of the defining traits of a hive, Al, you woman, is her refusal to seek clarity from the wrong person. She understands that if someone genuinely values her, they won't keep her in a state of confusion. They won't disappear for days, speak in half-truths, or offer vague answers that leave her second, guessing everything. Instead, the right person will show up clearly, consistently, and intentionally. But Al, you woman doesn't wait around for that to happen. She watches, listens, and responds to the signals she's being given, not the excuses she's being told. Far too often, people fall into the trap of overanalyzing someone's behavior, thinking they just need to understand a little more in order to feel secure. They go down rabbit holes of decoding text messages, replaying conversations in their heads, and convincing themselves that mixed signals are just a sign of someone being scared or not ready. The Al, you woman doesn't do this. She doesn't give her peace of mind away to someone who's giving her emotional breadcrumbs. She doesn't invest more energy into someone who's giving her less and less. She recognizes that needing to chase clarity is already a sign of emotional imbalance in the connection, and she won't contort herself to fix what isn't hers to fix. In relationships, communication is everything. And a lack of clarity is communication in itself. Silence, inconsistency, and avoidance aren't neutral. They send a message loud and clear: I'm not ready, I'm not invested, or worse, I don't care enough to give you the certainty you deserve. Val, you woman sees that message for what it is, even if it's disappointing. She doesn't try to rewrite it into a more comforting story. She trusts the data of someone's actions, not the fantasy of their potential. She's not afraid to walk away when someone won't meet her at her level, because she'd rather be alone with peace than together in confusion. That doesn't mean she lacks empathy. In fact, the Val, you woman is often deeply understanding. She gets that people have their own wounds, fears, and timelines. She respects that. But she also understands that someone else's emotional chaos is not her burden to carry. She's not in the business of convincing someone to be ready, to open up, or to love her. She knows love doesn't require persuasion. It reveals itself naturally when two people are in alignment. If that alignment isn't there, she lets go with grace rather than trying to force the puzzle pieces to fit. Seeking clarity from the wrong person is often rooted in fear. Fear of losing the connection, fear of being alone, fear that we weren't enough. But the Val, you woman has already done the inner work to know that being enough was never the issue. She doesn't take someone else's uncertainty personally. She doesn't view a lack of reciprocation as a reflection of her worth. Instead, she views it as a reflection of where that person is, and then she acts accordingly. No begging, no convincing, just a clear boundary between what she will tolerate and what she won't. One of the strongest things about a Al, you woman, is her emotional self-respect. She doesn't panic in the face of ambiguity. She doesn't chase down conversations that should have been offered freely. She allows space for people to show her who they are, and when they do, she believes them. If someone is hesitant, she gives them room. If someone disappears, she doesn't chase. If someone returns only when it's convenient, she recognizes the pattern and steps out of it. She doesn't mistake inconsistency for depth or confusion for mystery. She sees through the noise and chooses peace. This isn't about being cold or emotionally unavailable. It's about having enough inner stability to say, if it's unclear, it's not for me. And that takes strength, because it's tempting to cling to potential, to chase after words left unsaid, or to fight for closure that someone refuses to give. But Al, you woman provides closure for herself. She doesn't wait for the other person to make sense of it. She doesn't need a final conversation to validate her experience. She walks away when she knows the energy isn't mutual, and that act alone is her clarity. This approach doesn't make her emotionless. It makes her emotionally intelligent. She still feels the loss, the disappointment, the sadness. She just doesn't let those feelings drive her into self-abandonment. She stays anchored to her standards even when it's uncomfortable. And ironically, that's what creates space for the right kind of connection. The kind where she doesn't need to chase anything because it's already flowing naturally. She knows that if she has to chase it, it's already running away. And anything that requires her to lose herself in order to keep it isn't something she ever wanted in the first place. Ahai, Val, you woman moves through the world with quiet confidence, not because she thinks she's better than anyone else, but because she deeply understands her worth. That's why she never competes for attention, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. She doesn't play the game of trying to outshine, outperform, or prove her value to win someone over. If she senses she's being put in a position where she has to fight for someone's affection, she walks away, not out of pride, but out of principle. Because the moment she has to start proving her worth to be chosen, she knows she's already in the wrong place. There's a certain narrative that's been subtly fed to women for years, that if you just try a little harder, look a little better, be a little more interesting, then you'll finally be the one for someone. It's a mindset that breeds insecurity and comparison, where women find themselves wondering, what does she have that I don't? Or how do I stand out to him? The hive, Al, you woman refuses to engage with that energy. She doesn't see other women as competition because she's not auditioning for a role in someone else's story. She's the author of her own, and anyone who wants to be part of it has to come correct. When a man is truly interested and emotionally available, he doesn't create an environment where a woman feels she has to compete. He makes her feel safe, seen, and chosen. If instead he's entertaining multiple women, keeping his options open, or being vague about his intentions, ahai, Al, you woman doesn't try to change that. She doesn't attempt to outperform the others in his orbit. She simply removes herself from the situation. She knows that when a man is serious, there is no competition. There's only clarity, and anything less than that isn't worth her time. It's not about arrogance or a sense of entitlement. It's about alignment. She understands that love is not a race where the most impressive woman wins. Real love isn't a performance. It's a connection that naturally builds between two people who are showing up as their authentic selves. If she can't do that, if she has to constantly position herself to be noticed, to be picked, to be validated, then she knows she's lost before she's even begun. Because the moment you start to compete for attention, you're no longer acting from self-worth, you're acting from scarcity. She's not afraid to walk away, even if she feels drawn to someone. Her feelings do not override her standards. She knows that connection without exclusivity often leads to confusion, and confusion leads to self-doubt. And she never wants to be in a relationship where she's constantly asking herself where she stands. She wants mutual effort, mutual interest, mutual investment. If that's not on offer, she doesn't negotiate with her instincts. She honors them. Ahai, Val, you woman also trusts in timing. She knows she doesn't need to rush or force anything. If someone doesn't recognize her value, she doesn't waste time trying to convince them. She lets them go, not as punishment, but as protection. She protects her energy fiercely. She guards her self-respect like it's sacred, because to her it is. When someone doesn't choose her clearly, she doesn't take it personally. Not everyone is meant to see your worth immediately, and that's okay. But she also knows she doesn't need to stay in the room, hoping they'll come around. Her time and emotional availability are privileges, not default settings. She knows what kind of relationship she wants. She wants depth, not drama. Security, not suspense. She's not interested in being a placeholder or a temporary thrill. And because she's so clear on that, She quickly sees when she's being pulled into a dynamic where attention is being divided. She doesn't spiral into jealousy. She doesn't start mirroring someone else's inconsistent behavior just to maintain relevance. She takes a breath, steps back, and reminds herself, if you have to fight to be seen, you're already being overlooked. Even in friendships or social settings, she applies this mindset. She doesn't chase popularity, validation, or status. She builds genuine connections with people who value her presence. And if she senses someone's energy shift, someone pulling back or making her feel like a backup plan, she doesn't beg for answers. She doesn't launch a campaign to win them back. She simply disengages and recenters on herself. This mindset doesn't come from never being hurt. It often comes from having been hurt, from having learned the hard way that chasing attention rarely leads to genuine connection. The high, Val, you woman has likely been through situations where she gave too much, waited too long, or tried too hard. But she took the lesson, not the wound. She grew from it, and now she's clear. Attention that must be earned through competition is never worth having. In a world that tells women to be pick-me-s, to stand out, to do more in order to be loved, the high, Val, you woman is the one who says, I don't need to be picked, I pick. She chooses how she's treated, where she invests, and what kind of behavior she allows. She doesn't demand attention. She doesn't manipulate to get it. She just shows up as her full self and the right people. People who recognize her without needing to be persuaded, gravitate toward her naturally. And that's the kind of attention she welcomes, the kind that doesn't need to be chased. There is a quiet strength in a woman who refuses to abandon her standards, especially in the pursuit of connection. A high, Val, you woman knows that relationships are not worth the cost of self-betrayal. While she may crave love, affection, and intimacy just like anyone else, she has learned that true connection cannot thrive in spaces where she is required to compromise what she knows she deserves. So she draws a line, not out of fear or arrogance, but from deep self-awareness. She refuses to lower the bar just to feel wanted for a moment, because she is playing a longer, more meaningful game. Temporary connection is seductive. It feels exciting in the moment. It can look like someone who texts at midnight, who says all the right things but never follows through. It can sound like, I'm just not ready for anything serious, followed by gestures that feel intimate but lack commitment. It can feel like chemistry that lights you up, but then leaves you empty. A high, Val, you woman doesn't ignore those red flags just because the feelings are intense. She knows the difference between being emotionally activated and being emotionally fulfilled. And she will not stay in something that only fills her halfway. She knows that the craving for connection is natural, but the decisions made in its name can often be costly. How many times have people settled for someone just because it felt good in the moment, only to regret how far they bent their own boundaries? How many times have women told themselves, maybe I'm asking for too much, when in reality they were asking for the bare minimum: consistency, respect, honesty. The high, Val, you woman no longer questions whether her standards are too high. Instead, she questions why she would stay in a dynamic that requires her to shrink in order to be accepted. There's a kind of maturity that comes with being able to enjoy someone's presence without needing to possess them. That maturity allows her to walk away when the situation doesn't align with her values, even if the attraction is strong. She's able to separate chemistry from compatibility. Chemistry can spark with anyone, but compatibility, the ability to show up, communicate, build, respect each other, that takes more. And if that part is missing, she doesn't try to force it. She doesn't fantasize about fixing someone or loving them into readiness. She steps back because she understands that love built on compromise of self is not love, it's survival. Her standards aren't a wall to keep people out. They are a filter that protects what's sacred. She wants joy, peace, partnership, growth. And she knows those things don't come from relationships based on temporary highs or momentary affection. She is willing to go without attention if it means protecting her inner peace. She is willing to be single if it means not having to explain to someone why basic respect is not optional. She is willing to miss someone if it means maintaining her dignity. That's not bitterness, it's clarity. This kind of clarity comes from self-trust. She trusts her intuition when something feels off, even if there's no proof. She doesn't gaslight herself into staying in situations that feel wrong. She doesn't silence the part of her that wants more, needs more, deserves more. Even if no one around her understands, even if friends say, "You're being too picky," she listens to the quiet voice within that says, "Don't settle," because she knows the cost of settling. It's a slow erosion of self. And she has worked too hard to rebuild herself to let that happen again. She also understands that people will test her boundaries, even unintentionally. Someone might want access to her, but not offer commitment. Someone might enjoy her warmth but never step up in a real way. She doesn't make excuses for that. She doesn't say, "Maybe if I'm more patient, he'll change." She knows that a person who is meant for her won't need endless patience just to meet her halfway. So she holds the line. She doesn't shame others for not being able to meet her needs, but she also doesn't abandon those needs in order to stay connected. There's a misconception that standards push people away, but the truth is, the right people are drawn to them. The right person isn't intimidated by what she asks for. They're relieved to find someone who knows who she is. Standards don't repel love. They refine it. They separate the ones who are just curious from the ones who are serious, and that is exactly what she wants. She doesn't want to be everything to everyone. She wants to be everything to the right one. This mindset doesn't make her immune to loneliness. Of course, she feels it sometimes. She has moments of missing someone, of wondering when her person will arrive. But even in those moments, she doesn't negotiate with her standards. She doesn't text someone she knows isn't good for her just to feel something. She sits with the discomfort, knowing that it's temporary. She understands that loneliness is a passing state, but losing yourself for connection can leave a mark that's hard to undo. So she waits, not passively, not with desperation, but with confidence. She continues living, loving, building. She pours into herself, into her passions, into her friendships. And when someone comes along who doesn't make her question herself, who aligns with what she's been holding out for, she'll recognize it, not because she needed them, but because she never settled for less. A high value woman makes her decisions from a place of grounded self-worth, not from insecurity. This doesn't mean she's never felt insecure or never doubted herself. On the contrary, she's likely had moments of self-doubt, fear, and even heartbreak. But she's done the work to understand that her emotions don't define her value. She knows who she is, and more importantly, she knows how to come back to herself when those emotions start to pull her off center. That inner stability is what guides her. It's what helps her stay calm in the face of uncertainty, and it's what protects her from falling into patterns of chasing validation from others. Insecurity often pushes people to make impulsive or self-sacrificing choices. It whispers things like, "If you don't say yes now, you'll lose them," or "If you ask for too much, they'll walk away." A woman who's still being led by insecurity might silence her needs in order to keep someone close. She might over-explain herself, overextend herself, or tolerate things that make her feel small, all because she fears being left behind. But the high-value woman moves differently. She doesn't operate from scarcity. She doesn't believe love is something that needs to be earned through proving, pleasing, or performing. She believes love is something that reveals itself naturally between two aligned people, and she refuses to hustle for what should be given freely. Her self-worth is not inflated, it's embodied. She's not trying to convince anyone she's enough. She's not chasing approval or applause. She already knows she's enough before the call, before the compliment, before the commitment. And that belief shapes how she shows up. It allows her to speak directly, to set boundaries without guilt, and to ask for what she wants without shame. Because when you know you are worthy, you don't need to make yourself smaller to be accepted. You don't need to apologize for having needs. You trust that the right people won't be scared off by your standards. They'll be drawn to them. This kind of inner strength shows up most clearly in moments of tension or doubt. Let's say the person she's dating goes quiet for a few days or gives a vague response about the future. She doesn't spiral into overthinking or jump into proving her worth. She observes, she gives space, and then she acts. If something doesn't feel right, she communicates it calmly and clearly, not as a test, not as manipulation, but as a reflection of her own clarity. And if the response she gets back is dismissive, evasive, or misaligned with her values, she doesn't beg for more. She doesn't twist herself into knots trying to change their mind. She simply makes the decision that serves her peace, because for her, peace is non-negotiable. She has no interest in chaotic love, in emotional roller coasters, or in being consumed by anxiety about where she stands. She's not addicted to intensity. She's attracted to security. And that only comes when both people feel free to be fully themselves without fear of losing each other over honesty. She seeks connection where she can relax, not relationships that keep her guessing. And because she values that so deeply, she'll walk away from anything that threatens it, even if walking away is painful in the short term. A lot of people confuse this kind of woman with being cold or detached. But that couldn't be further from the truth. She is deeply emotional. She loves hard. She cares with her whole heart. But the difference is, she doesn't love others more than she loves herself. Her compassion has boundaries. Her loyalty has conditions. She can hold space for someone's humanity without losing herself in their chaos. And that ability, to feel deeply while still holding firm, comes directly from her self-worth. She also doesn't rely on external factors to feel whole. She's built a life she loves outside of relationships. Her career, her friendships, her hobbies, her personal growth, all of it matters. So when someone enters her life, they're not filling a void. They are adding to an already rich existence. That balance gives her perspective. It allows her to want someone without needing them. It lets her appreciate love when it's present, but not chase it when it's not. Because her life isn't on hold waiting for someone to choose her. She's already chosen herself every single day. This doesn't mean she never feels fear. She still gets vulnerable. She still feels that pang of uncertainty when someone doesn't show up the way she hoped. But she doesn't let that fear steer her into self-abandonment. She holds herself steady. She takes the time to feel her emotions, but she doesn't let those emotions drive her back into relationships that feel unstable. That emotional maturity is what sets her apart. She doesn't just ask, "Do they like me?" She asks, "Do I feel safe here, seen here, supported here?" And if the answer is no, she doesn't blame herself. She trusts her truth and acts accordingly. At the heart of it all, she knows that self-worth is not about always feeling confident. It's about acting in alignment with your values even when it's hard. Even when you want to chase, you choose to pause. Even when you feel rejected, you choose to remain grounded. And even when you're tempted to prove yourself, you remember. You don't need to prove what is already true. You are enough just as you are. The ones who matter will see that without needing to be convinced. And you'll keep showing up with your head high, heart open, and standards intact. You woman doesn't just passively wait for love to find her. She doesn't chase after anyone who isn't showing up as fully present or invested. She knows her energy is valuable, and she uses it wisely. Her time, her emotions, her attention, they are all precious, and she doesn't give them to anyone who doesn't prove they're worthy of them. She understands that her worth isn't determined by how much someone else values her. It's defined by how much she values herself. This is not to say that she's unapproachable or unwilling to connect. Quite the opposite. She's open to connection, to meeting new people, to exploring relationships, but she does so from a place of abundance, not desperation. She's not worried that if she lets someone go, she'll never find someone else. She's not afraid of being single because she knows that being single doesn't mean being lonely. She understands that when you're comfortable with who you are, your relationships are an enhancement, not a necessity. She knows that she's enough on her own, and that's why she never clings to anyone for validation. The moment she senses that someone isn't giving the same level of commitment or effort, she pulls back. She doesn't beg. She doesn't chase. She simply lets them be who they are, and she moves on with grace. It's not about giving up on people. It's about choosing to not invest in relationships that don't align with her values or standards. She refuses to tolerate emotional inconsistencies or unclear intentions because she knows that her worth isn't something that needs to be earned through proving herself or tolerating misbehavior. Her decision to not chase attention stems from her understanding that true connection requires reciprocity. When a relationship is built on mutual respect, communication, and effort, both parties show up in equal measure. She doesn't give more than she receives, and she certainly doesn't wait around for someone to recognize her value. She doesn't believe in forcing connections or bending herself to fit someone else's idea of what she should be. She is confident in who she is, and she knows that if someone doesn't appreciate that, it's not her problem. She's not willing to change herself or shrink her standards just to fit someone's expectations. Moreover, a high-value woman knows that her time is the most valuable thing she has. She's not willing to spend it on someone who isn't ready to meet her halfway. She doesn't waste her time on games, misunderstandings, or relationships that don't align with her goals and desires. She wants depth, not superficiality. She wants honesty, not uncertainty. She wants a partner who is equally invested in building something real and lasting, not someone who keeps her on the sidelines, wondering if she's good enough or if he's really into her. She knows that someone who truly values her won't make her question her place in their life. When she sees someone who is emotionally unavailable or inconsistent, she doesn't chase them or try to change their mind. She steps back with dignity. She doesn't get frustrated with the person, but rather she sees it as an opportunity to protect her energy. She doesn't believe in forcing someone to be ready for her. If they are, they will show up with clear intentions, and if they're not, she moves on without hesitation. She refuses to be anyone's backup or second choice. She knows that she deserves someone who is all in, someone who is ready and willing to build a life together. It's not that she's immune to emotional attraction or immune to wanting someone to reciprocate her feelings. It's that she understands the difference between wanting someone and needing someone. A high-value woman is not desperate for love, attention, or approval. She's not afraid of being single because she knows that being single is not a reflection of her worth. She doesn't need validation from someone else to feel whole. Instead, she focuses on her own growth, her own happiness, and her own goals. She fills her life with things that bring her joy, and when someone enters her life, it's to add to what she's already built. It's not to complete her. She's already complete. When she chooses to invest in someone, she does so with full awareness. She doesn't fall for empty promises or false hope. She's clear about what she wants, and she's not afraid to express it. She communicates her needs openly and expects the same level of honesty from others. She isn't afraid to walk away from something that doesn't align with her values. She won't tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional games, because she knows that these are signs of someone who isn't ready to show up the way she deserves. And she won't settle for less than what she knows she's worth. Her confidence in her own value is what allows her to walk away from situations that don't serve her. She doesn't do it out of bitterness or resentment. She does it out of self-respect. She understands that there's no need to hold on to something that's not meant for her. She trusts that the right relationship will come into her life when the time is right. And in the meantime, she continues to live her life to the fullest. She invests in herself, in her passions, in her career, and in her friendships. She knows that her happiness is not dependent on anyone else, and she doesn't rely on someone else's approval to feel worthy. In the end, a high-value woman's decision to not chase attention is not about being distant or unapproachable. It's about recognizing her worth and choosing to spend her energy on things and people that truly add value to her life. She understands that love and connection are not about clinging to someone who isn't ready to meet her where she is. They're about mutual respect, alignment, and a shared vision for the future. And until she finds that, she remains confident in her own worth, knowing that she deserves someone who will match her level of commitment and effort. A high-value woman doesn't just accept relationships as they come. She actively chooses the ones that align with her needs, values, and desires. She doesn't settle for anything that asks her to abandon her sense of self-worth or requires her to shrink in order to make space for someone else. Instead, she's highly discerning when it comes to who she gives her time and energy. She understands that not every relationship is meant to last, and she doesn't waste her time trying to force things that aren't working. She knows that relationships, like everything in life, require balance. They need to be mutually beneficial, built on shared effort and respect. This means she's willing to walk away when necessary, even if the connection feels promising in the moment. The high-value woman is not in a rush to settle down or find the one. She's focused on building her life, fulfilling her own goals, and creating a life that brings her joy, peace, and contentment. When she does choose to enter a relationship, it is because she sees potential for growth and mutual fulfillment. She is not looking for someone to complete her or fill a void. She already feels whole and complete, and she seeks a partner who adds value to the life she has already built. She doesn't expect anyone to make her happy. She expects that someone will enhance her happiness, contribute to her growth, and match her energy. She is also clear about her boundaries. She knows what she will tolerate and what she won't, and she is not afraid to enforce those boundaries. For her, respect is non-negotiable, and if someone is unwilling to respect her boundaries, she will not hesitate to walk away. She doesn't entertain relationships that make her feel anxious, undervalued, or uncertain. She doesn't feel the need to constantly ask herself where she stands or why someone isn't making more of an effort. She trusts that the right person will naturally align with her energy, and if someone isn't putting in the effort, she chooses not to waste her time trying to figure them out. A high-value woman understands that her emotional energy is precious, and she doesn't give it freely to anyone who doesn't meet her standards. She knows that being emotionally available is not the same as being emotionally invested. She is open to meaningful connections, but she will not open herself up fully to someone who is not equally invested in building a relationship with her. She doesn't settle for casual or half-hearted connections. If someone is unable to show up in the ways that she needs, she doesn't continue to pour her energy into something that isn't growing. She respects her own emotions enough to walk away when necessary, and in doing so, she protects her own emotional well-being. This is where the high-value woman's commitment to herself shines through. She is not afraid of solitude. In fact, she embraces it as an opportunity for self-reflection, growth, and self-care. She doesn't feel the need to be constantly in a relationship or to have someone by her side to feel fulfilled. She is perfectly content with herself, and she enjoys spending time doing things that nourish her mind, body, and spirit. Whether it's pursuing a passion, spending time with loved ones, or simply enjoying a quiet evening alone. She knows how to fill her own cup before seeking to share it with someone else. Her approach to relationships is grounded in a deep sense of self-respect. She knows that she deserves someone who treats her with kindness, honesty, and commitment. She doesn't settle for someone who is indifferent, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable. She doesn't convince herself that she can change someone or that they will eventually come around. She knows that actions speak louder than words, and she watches for consistent effort rather than empty promises. If someone shows her through their actions that they aren't the right fit, she lets go with grace, knowing that she is worthy of someone who is fully aligned with her desires and values. The high-value woman also understands that relationships take time and effort to develop. She isn't looking for instant gratification or a whirlwind romance. She values deep, meaningful connections that are built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. She isn't afraid of the slow burn of a relationship that develops over time. She values quality over quantity and is willing to take her time to get to know someone and allow the relationship to grow organically. She isn't interested in rushing through the process to fulfill some external expectation of what a relationship should look like. She is patient and she knows that the best relationships take time to develop. She also knows the importance of maintaining her individuality in a relationship. You woman never loses herself in a relationship or allows her identity to be defined solely by her partner. She continues to nurture her own interests, passions, and friendships while being in a committed relationship. She understands that a healthy relationship is one where both partners continue to grow and evolve individually while also supporting each other's growth together. She does not seek a partner who expects her to be something she is not, nor does she settle for a relationship that demands she sacrifices who she is in order to fit someone else's mold. You woman is clear about what she wants and what she will not tolerate. She does not waste time trying to mold herself into someone else's expectations, and she certainly won't mold someone else into what she needs. She recognizes that true love is about mutual respect, effort, and alignment, and she will not settle for anything less. She understands that the right relationship will add value to her life without requiring her to compromise her standards or abandon her sense of self. She is unwavering in her belief that she deserves the best, and she is confident that the right person will recognize that and show up with the same level of commitment and effort. Until then, she remains whole, focused on her own growth and happiness, knowing that she will never settle for anything less than the love she deserves.